Hi friends, I hope you are doing well. Welcome to Learn English with Stories. Welcome to Everdale, where the biggest drama in town isn't a bank heist or a love affair. It's a toaster. Join us for The Great Toaster Debacle, a hilarious tale of two neighbors, an old toaster, and a courtroom showdown that will have you laughing out loud. Get ready for the most absurd and entertaining dispute you've ever seen. Let's dive in. In the small town of Everdale, where life moved at a gentle pace, there lived two neighbors, Mr. Harris and Mrs. Thompson. Their relationship had always been cordial, marked by polite nods over the fence and the occasional exchange of baked goods. Mrs. Thompson, a widow known for her kindness, often shared her famous apple pies with Mr. Harris, a retired schoolteacher who reciprocated with his homemade bread. The two neighbors enjoyed their peaceful coexistence, sharing gardening tips and sometimes even watching the sunset together from their respective porches. However, their tranquility took a nosedive over a seemingly trivial issue: a toaster. One sunny afternoon, Mrs. Thompson's old toaster broke down, and knowing Mr. Harris had an extra, she kindly asked if she could borrow it until she got a new one. Mr. Harris, always eager to help, lent her his spare toaster with a smile. Days turned into weeks, and Mrs. Thompson had grown quite fond of the borrowed toaster, praising its efficiency and how perfectly it toasted her bread. Despite her intentions to return it promptly, she delayed, enjoying the convenience it brought to her morning routine. Mr. Harris, on the other hand, began to miss his toaster, particularly on the mornings when he craved his own perfectly toasted slices. He started to harbor a quiet resentment, feeling his generosity was being taken advantage of. What began as a simple favor soon spiraled into a series of misunderstandings and unspoken frustrations. Mr. Harris subtly hinted about the toaster's return, but Mrs. Thompson, absorbed in her daily tasks, failed to catch his drift. The tension grew, casting a shadow over their once harmonious relationship. Friendly greetings turned into curt acknowledgments, and the exchange of baked goods ceased. The townspeople of Everdale, always keen on their neighbors' affairs, noticed the change and speculated on the cause. The toaster, now a symbol of their strained bond, sat in Mrs. Thompson's kitchen, a silent witness to the growing rift. It was astonishing how such a minor household appliance could disrupt the peace and neighborly love that had once flourished in Everdale. Mr. Harris was a man of routine. Every morning, he toasted exactly 2 slices of whole grain bread to a perfect golden brown. His toaster, a vintage model inherited from his late grandmother, was a prized possession. Though it was an unassuming appliance with faded paint and a slightly worn-out handle, it held immense sentimental value for Mr. Harris, reminding him of the comforting breakfasts he used to share with his grandmother. It wasn't just a toaster. It was a piece of his family history, a reliable companion that had been by his side for decades, claiming the title of Best Toast Maker in Mr. Harris's eyes. Mrs. Thompson, on the other hand, was an early riser with a penchant for trying new gadgets. Her kitchen was a testament to modern technology, filled with the latest appliances that promised to make life easier and meals more delicious. One fateful day, she acquired a state-of-the-art, multifunctional toaster that promised to revolutionize breakfast. This new toaster could not only toast bread but also bake, grill, and even make sandwiches, all with the press of a button. The sleek design and advanced features excited Mrs. Thompson, who eagerly looked forward to experimenting with it. However, as fate would have it, her fancy new toaster malfunctioned just days after its arrival, leaving her morning routine in disarray. Remembering Mr. Harris's reliable vintage toaster, she approached him with a humble request to borrow it. Mr. Harris, always the gentleman, agreed, albeit with a twinge of reluctance, knowing how much his toaster meant to him. He hoped Mrs. Thompson would appreciate its value and return it soon. As days turned into weeks, Mrs. Thompson became increasingly enamored with the borrowed toaster's simplicity and efficiency. She praised its consistent performance and found herself reluctant to part with it. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris's mornings grew lonelier without his cherished toaster, the absence of its familiar click and hum creating a void in his routine. The bond between them, once strengthened by shared treats and neighborly gestures, began to fray under the weight of the unreturned toaster. Despite Mr. Harris's subtle hints about needing his toaster back, Mrs. Thompson, caught up in her daily chores and the ease of using the vintage toaster, didn't sense the urgency in his requests. This small act of borrowing, which was intended to be temporary, became a source of quiet frustration and brewing tension between the neighbors. The toaster, now a symbol of their strained relationship, stood at the center of a growing discord, highlighting how even the smallest misunderstandings could affect their once harmonious lives in Everdale. One Saturday morning, as Mr. Harris prepared his toast, he noticed his toaster was gone. In its place was Mrs. Thompson's new, gleaming machine. Confused and slightly irked, he marched next door. Mrs. Thompson greeted him warmly, oblivious to the brewing storm. "Good morning, Mr. Harris. Isn't it a lovely day?" "Lovely indeed, Mrs. Thompson. But I believe you have something that belongs to me," Mr. Harris responded, trying to keep his composure. Mrs. Thompson looked puzzled until Mr. Harris pointed out the toaster. Her eyes widened in realization. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I must have taken it by mistake when I was tidying up the kitchen. Let me get it back for you." However, when she tried to return the toaster, Mr. Harris discovered it had been altered. Mrs. Thompson's attempt to modernize it with new settings and knobs rendered it unrecognizable. Outraged, Mr. Harris demanded a full replacement, while Mrs. Thompson insisted she had improved it. Thus began the Great Toaster debacle. Word of the dispute spread quickly through Everdale, dividing the town into two camps. Team Harris, who believed in the sanctity of personal property and tradition, and Team Thompson, who supported innovation and progress. The local diner, usually a hub of friendly banter, became a battleground for heated discussions about the merits of old versus new toasters. The climax of the feud arrived when both parties decided to take the matter to court. Judge Morton, known for his wisdom and love of theatrics, was assigned the case. The courtroom was packed, with townsfolk eagerly awaiting the outcome of the most talked-about trial in Everdale's history. The proceedings began with Mr. Harris passionately defending his toaster's sentimental value. He recounted childhood memories of his grandmother's kitchen, painting a vivid picture of the toaster's irreplaceable role in his life. Mrs. Thompson, in her defense, argued that she had only meant to enhance the toaster's functionality and never intended to cause harm. Judge Morton listened intently, occasionally nodding and scribbling notes. After both sides presented their arguments, he called for a brief recess. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for his verdict. When the court reconvened, Judge Morton delivered his judgment with dramatic flair. "Ladies and gentlemen of Everdale, we stand divided over a matter of toast. This humble appliance has caused a rift in our community, but I believe I have a solution that will toast away our troubles." He proposed an absurd yet comical resolution: a toast-off competition. Mr. Harris and Mrs. Thompson would each prepare toast using their respective toasters, and a panel of impartial judges would determine which one made the best toast. The loser would have to publicly acknowledge the superiority of the winner's toaster. The town erupted in laughter and applause at the sheer ridiculousness of the idea. The competition was set for the following weekend, with much fanfare and excitement. On the day of the toast-off, the town square was transformed into a festive arena. Banners and balloons adorned the streets, and the aroma of freshly toasted bread filled the air. Mr. Harris, with his vintage toaster, faced off against Mrs. Thompson and her modern marvel. The judges, consisting of the town's most esteemed toast enthusiasts, scrutinized each slice for texture, color, and taste. After much deliberation, they declared a tie. Both toasters produced equally delightful toast, much to the amusement of the crowd. Judge Morton, with a twinkle in his eye, declared the dispute resolved and emphasized the importance of unity and friendship over trivial disagreements. In the end, Mr. Harris and Mrs. Thompson shook hands, agreeing to share their toasting tips and techniques. The Great Toaster Debacle became a cherished anecdote in Everdale's history, a reminder of how even the pettiest disputes could be resolved with humor and community spirit. The townsfolk returned to their daily routines, united by the memory of the most entertaining courtroom drama they had ever witnessed. And so, life in Everdale went on, with Mr. Harris and Mrs. Thompson often seen enjoying breakfast together, toasting to their newfound friendship. Thank you so much for watching The Great Toaster Debacle. We hope you enjoyed this comedic tale of petty disputes and absurd resolutions. If you had as much fun watching it as we did creating it, please hit that like button and share this video with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Learn English with Stories, for more entertaining and educational content. By subscribing and turning on the notification bell, you'll be the first to know whenever we release a new story. We love hearing from our viewers, so please leave a comment below and let us know what you thought of this story. Do you have any funny or ridiculous disputes you'd like to see turned into a comedy sketch? Share your ideas with us. We might just feature your suggestion in our next video. Lastly, follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content, updates, and more fun interactions. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to bringing you more laughter and learning in our upcoming videos. See you next time.